The wedding planner for my brother-in-law's wedding called. "Mrs. Clark, I'm calling to confirm the final details for the Dawson Reed wedding." The planner's voice had that smooth, professional cadence that sounded like it was stretched thin, ready to crack. However, we received some conflicting instructions from your husband yesterday. He informed us that you would no longer be attending, but that all the financial arrangements should remain the same. The receiver felt cold in my hand as her words sank in. My husband, Ethan, had systematically cut me out of his brother Leo's wedding, yet he made sure my $50,000 contribution stayed firmly in their hands. The sheer audacity of it to erase my presence while pocketing my money was a calculated cruelty that went far beyond a simple family spat. "I see," I said, my voice holding the calm, measured tone that had served me well for 12 years. Building Apex Hospitality from an idea into a powerhouse across the Mountain West. Could you please specify which financial arrangements my husband was referring to? Before we get any further, I want to thank you for being here, sharing stories about finding your power when the world tries to take it away. If you believe that quiet strength deserves to be seen and respected, please take a moment to subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it helps this community grow, reaching more people who need to be reminded they aren't alone. Now let's get back to the story and watch this house of cards start to shake. The planner's unease was now a palpable thing, even over the phone. "Well, Mrs. Clark, he was specific about the $50,000 deposit you made for the venue rental, the catering services, and the block of rooms at the hotel. He assured us that despite the change in the guest list, those funds were to remain in place as planned." I put the call on speaker, leaning back in my leather office chair. I stared out at the Denver skyline from my 40th floor corner office. Far below, the city was alive with the hum of morning commuters, while in my silent sanctuary, my world was quietly rearranging itself around this cold, new truth about my marriage. Ethan had orchestrated my exclusion with the casual cruelty of a man who saw his wife not as a partner, but as a walking ATM. The quarterly earnings reports laid out on my polished oak desk suddenly looked like exhibits in a legal case I hadn't realized I was building. Apex Hospitality's latest figures showed growth that outpaced most mid-cap companies, profit margins that were the envy of seasoned investors, and a portfolio that spanned 5 states. And yet, the man I had shared my life with for over a decade still introduced me at parties as my wife who dabbles in event planning. "Mrs. Clark, are you still on the line?" The planner's voice was now tinged with genuine concern. I have to say, this whole situation feels highly unusual to our team. We've never had a scenario where the person providing the primary funding was cut from the event while their payment was still required. "Thank you for your transparency," I replied, my voice now carrying the steel that had closed impossible deals and navigated hostile takeovers. "I'll be handling this matter with my husband directly." After hanging up, I sat there, surrounded by the tangible proof of a life they had never cared to understand. The imported Italian coffee service I bought to celebrate landing our 10th major hotel contract gleamed in the morning sun. The original Colorado landscape paintings on the walls, worth more than their yearly salaries combined, had witnessed the late-night calls that shaped the hospitality industry across the region. My assistant had my day packed with 3 back-to-back acquisition meetings to expand our footprint into Utah. These were deals that took months of strategic work, deals Ethan waved off as Avery's little social clubs. The irony was a bitter pill. My own employees, my competitors, my industry peers, they all gave me a level of professional respect my own family had never once offered. I thought back to the family dinner just 3 weeks ago, where the seeds of this betrayal were planted. Leo had announced his engagement to Chloe, his joy obvious but shaded with a deep financial worry. The talk around our dining table was painfully predictable, as Ethan's family lamented the impossibility of affording a dream wedding. "Leo makes a good living as an engineer," his mother Helen had said with a sigh, But with Chloe's student debt and their new mortgage, there's just nothing left for a real celebration. She deserves so much more than a City Hall wedding, but we're looking at maybe $5,000 tops if they drain their savings. I listened in silence as they brainstormed budget cuts, a bachelor party at a chain restaurant, a wedding dress off a clearance rack, a reception in a community hall with plastic cutlery. Ethan joined in with a show of brotherly concern, shooting me little glances, assuming I might use my connections to get them a small discount somewhere. He never once considered that I could solve their entire problem with a single check that amounted to less than 2 days of Apex Hospitality's revenue. The conversation dragged on for an hour as I mentally calculated the cost of giving them everything they wanted. Stonehaven Manor for the ceremony, with its sweeping mountain views. Summit Fair. Catering for a reception that would be remembered for years. The Meridian Grand Hotel for their out-of-town guests, offering a level of luxury that would make everyone feel cherished. $50,000. It was less than I'd spent on the art in our foyer. It was a sum that would turn their humble plans into the experience of a lifetime. Later that night, when Helen's sister Jessica pulled me aside, her face stained with tears, asking if I knew any vendors who might offer a family discount, I made the choice that would set this whole disaster in motion. I wrote the check that evening with one condition, that my gift remained anonymous. I believed the purest gifts were given without any expectation of praise. "I can cover the whole wedding," I'd told her quietly in the kitchen, while Ethan was zoned out in front of the TV next door. "But this has to stay between us. Leo and Chloe should just enjoy their day, no strings attached." Jessica's relief was immense and genuine. She hugged me with a desperate gratitude, treating me like a miracle worker, never once realizing the mundane nature of such an expense for someone in my position. Neither of us knew that this act of solidarity would become the very tool used for my humiliation. Now, sitting in my office, processing Ethan's callous disregard for our marriage, I finally understood. My anonymous gift had created the perfect loophole for exploitation. By keeping my name off the contribution, I had allowed Ethan to write me out of the story while keeping the benefits. My desire to give quietly had been twisted into a weapon against me. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the reports that detailed my company's unstoppable growth. Within a few hours, more calls would come, and I would learn just how deep this family conspiracy ran. But for that moment, I sat quietly in the empire I had built, finally understanding that true power whispers while insecurity screams. And I had been whispering for far too long. My assistant's voice on the intercom cut through my thoughts. "Mrs. Clark, I have Fiona from Aspen Bloom Events on line 4. She says it's urgent regarding the Dawson Reed wedding." The timing sent a chill down my spine. A second call within minutes about the same event. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an unfolding catastrophe. I took the call, my hand trembling slightly despite my best efforts to remain composed. "Avery Clark speaking." "Mrs. Clark, thank you for taking my call." Fiona's voice was strained, the kind wedding planners get when a family implodes. "I'm in a very delicate position. We received some conflicting instructions about your involvement in the Dawson Reed celebration." The word involvement landed like a scalpel. Not my attendance, but my involvement, as if my very connection to the wedding had become a problem to be managed. "What kind of instructions?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your husband, Ethan, contacted our office yesterday. He requested that we remove your name from all guest lists, seating arrangements, and formal announcements. He was, however, very clear that all existing financial commitments should remain exactly as they were." The polite jargon couldn't hide the brutal truth. Ethan had systematically erased me, making sure my $50,000 check stayed put. He also provided new contact information for all future communications. Fiona went on, her discomfort obvious. "We were told to direct all vendor coordination through Jessica Clark from now on, Ethan's sister-in-law. I was being replaced by another Mrs. Clark, as if I were just an interchangeable part in the family machine. "Mrs. Clark, I need to be completely honest," Fiona said, her professional tone finally cracking. "In all my years of planning, I have never seen a situation where the main financial backer was excluded from the event while their funding was kept. My whole team is uneasy about moving forward without your direct approval. Even a stranger could see the moral bankruptcy of my husband's plan." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I put Fiona on hold and read the message that would incinerate the last remnants of our marriage. "Stop being so dramatic. You're not coming to the wedding. We're keeping the money because you offered it as a gift. We can talk about this when you've calmed down." The casual cruelty was breathtaking. 12 years of marriage dismissed in a text that painted me as a hysterical child. The phrase, "when you've calmed down," was pure venom. He was already framing my justified anger as irrational female emotion. He had humiliated me, stolen from me, and was now preemptively dismissing any response as drama. "Mrs. Clark? Are you there?" Fiona's voice pulled me back. "Yes, Fiona, I'm here. Please continue." "I needed to ask if you consent to these changes. Our contracts have clauses to protect funders from unauthorized alterations. And honestly, this seems to violate several industry ethics." The planner's concern just highlighted how badly Ethan had miscalculated. He assumed he could manipulate vendors who, he failed to realize, ultimately answered to me. He had lied about my consent while stealing my money and erasing my identity from the event. Also, Fiona continued, he seemed unfamiliar with our standard procedures. He asked questions suggesting he didn't grasp the full scope of services your deposit covered. That raised some red flags for us. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. "Jessica just called me crying about vendor problems. Fix this mess you've created. Leo doesn't need his wedding ruined because you can't handle a family decision like an adult." The victim blaming was dizzying. He was now blaming me for the chaos his own deception had caused, all while calling his theft and my exclusion a family decision. "Mrs. Clark," Fiona's voice grew more strained, "I should also tell you that other vendors have called us with similar concerns. Summit Fair Catering got a request to change the menu without consulting the financial backer. The Meridian Grand Hotel was told to alter guest room blocks but keep the billing the same. The conspiracy was wider than I'd imagined. Ethan had contacted every single vendor, meticulously removing me while locking in my financial liability. And there's one more thing," Fiona said, hesitating. "Mr. Clark mentioned these changes were needed because of your tendency toward emotional instability at family functions. He implied your presence might create an uncomfortable atmosphere. He had assassinated my character to justify my removal, painting me as an unstable woman to be managed. The man who lived a life of luxury funded by my success was now telling people I was too mentally fragile to attend a party. My reflection in the dark glass of the window showed a woman whose composure was finally starting to splinter. The empire I'd built to shield myself from the world felt useless when the people closest to me had decided I was disposable. For the first time in a very long time, I felt my carefully constructed professional armor begin to crack, leaving me exposed. The call from Jessica, Ethan's sister-in-law, came less than 30 minutes later. Her name flashed on my screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but a morbid curiosity won out. "Avery, thank God you answered." Her voice was high and shaky as if she'd been crying. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I need to explain." "Has there been?" I kept my tone perfectly level, though my heart was pounding. A tiny, foolish part of me hoped there was a rational explanation for this nightmare. "Listen, we were just trying to protect you," she began, the words sounding rehearsed. "Ethan told us how stressed you've been with work, how overwhelming these family things have become for you. We thought if we handled all the wedding details, you could just relax and enjoy the day without any of the pressure. It was a beautifully crafted lie, reframing betrayal as an act of kindness. Jessica, I was uninvited from the wedding. How exactly does that protect me from pressure? Well, that part got a little messy. Her voice faltered, the first crack in her script. There were some family dynamics we thought might cause tension. You know how emotional these things can get? We just wanted the focus to stay on Leo and Chloe. The euphemisms were piling up. Family dynamics was their code for a coordinated exclusion. Emotional was their word for my expected outrage. And Leo and Chloe's happiness was their excuse for treating me as a threat to a celebration that only existed because of me. But we absolutely want you to know how grateful we are for your gift, she rushed on, sensing my cold silence. That money is making their dream wedding a reality. We'll never forget your generosity. The casual mention of keeping my $50,000 while kicking me out was stunning. They truly believed they could steal from me, erase me, and then thank me for it. Jessica, whose idea was it to remove me from the guest list? A long pause. It was a family decision, she finally said. We all talked it over and agreed this was the best approach for everyone. They had held meetings. My husband and his family had sat around discussing whether the woman funding the entire event even deserved to be there, including Leo. Leo just wants what's best for family harmony. He's so grateful for your support and doesn't want any conflict to overshadow his big day. Leo's silence was its own form of betrayal. Hours had passed since the vendors started calling, and he hadn't reached out once, not with confusion, not with concern, not with thanks. When he finally did call, 20 minutes after I hung up with Jessica, his voice was heavy with the weary obligation of someone checking a box on a to-do list. Avery, I wanted to personally thank you for your incredible generosity. Your support means the world to Chloe and me, and we really appreciate your understanding about the guest list situation. My understanding? The word slipped out, sharp and cold. Leo, I found out I was uninvited to your wedding from a vendor. What precisely am I supposed to be understanding? Well, the family just thought it would be better to keep things a bit smaller, more intimate. You know how complicated it gets with too many personalities involved. He was using the same script. I was a personality problem. Leo, I paid for your entire wedding. Does that fact enter into your understanding of the situation at all? He let out a nervous little laugh. Avery, you offered that money as a gift. We're so grateful, but gifts don't come with strings attached, do they? The man whose engineering career was built on logic couldn't see the ethical collapse of his own argument. He had turned my generosity into a no-strings-attached windfall that absolved him of any decency toward me. Ethan's arrival home that evening was the final confirmation of how completely my relationships had shattered. He walked into the kitchen not with an apology, but with the aggressive stance of a man convinced he was the one who had been wronged. I hope you're happy with the chaos you've caused, he spat, dropping his briefcase on the counter. Jessica spent all afternoon in tears because vendors are asking inappropriate questions about family matters. The audacity was breathtaking. He was blaming me for the confusion created by his own lies. You had me uninvited from your brother's wedding while keeping my money, Ethan. The chaos was created by your betrayal, not my reaction to it. Betrayal? His voice rose in genuine disbelief. I was trying to prevent drama. Your success has made you arrogant, Avery. You think because you paid for something, you get to control it. There it was, the resentment that had been festering for 12 years. He didn't see my success as our success. He saw it as a threat to his ego. This was never about family harmony. It was about putting the successful wife back in her place. 12 years of supporting your career, funding our lifestyle, and putting up with your family's condescension, and you think I'm the arrogant one? You see? This is exactly the kind of emotional outburst we were trying to avoid at the wedding. Leo doesn't need his big day ruined by your need to be the center of attention. He was rewriting our history in real time. My quiet support had been twisted into attention-seeking drama. Lying in our king-size bed that night, the silence between us was a vast, cold ocean. I had spent 12 years building bridges to people who were secretly planning to burn them the moment I stopped being useful. My empire, my money, my reputation, none of it mattered in the face of the devastating realization that to my own family, I was disposable. Morning brought no comfort. I woke to find Ethan already gone, a silent departure that spoke volumes. The emptiness of our home felt different now, charged with the chilling knowledge that the man I'd built a life with viewed me as little more than an obstacle. My phone showed 3 missed calls from his mother, Helen, and a voicemail delivered in the carefully modulated tone she used for family crises. "Avery, darling," her recorded voice began, smooth as silk. "Ethan mentioned there were some concerns about the wedding plans. I just wanted you to know how much we all appreciate your generous gift. Perhaps it's best we just let bygones be bygones and focus on Leo's happiness." Her words were a masterclass in minimization, treating coordinated theft and humiliation like a childish spat. Within the hour, his sister Olivia called, her approach slightly different but equally manipulative. "Avery, I know how challenging family stuff can be," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sympathy. Ethan explained there was some tension, and honestly, these big events bring out the worst in everyone. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that you get to avoid all that stress. She was framing my exclusion as a lucky escape, a favor they had done for me. "You know how emotional these things can get," she added, "especially with a lot of strong personalities." The implication was clear. I was the strong, problematic personality they needed to manage. The most disturbing call, however, came from Chloe, Leo's fiancée. Her performance was flawless, a perfect blend of innocence and gratitude designed to deflect all responsibility. "Avery, I wanted to personally thank you for being so understanding," she began, her voice radiating warmth. "I know these events get complicated, and your willingness to prioritize Leo's happiness over any personal concerns just shows what a wonderful person you are." She was thanking me for accepting a decision I never made, praising my character for tolerating their betrayal. "Leo is so grateful for your generosity," she went on. "He keeps saying how lucky we are to have family who care more about our happiness than their own recognition." The subtle jab about my supposed need for recognition revealed just how thoroughly Ethan had poisoned the well, painting my justifiable outrage as wounded pride. In stark contrast, my business relationships held firm. My assistant discreetly mapped the network of vendors, while my legal team reviewed every contract. The most telling response came from Ben Carter, my closest business partner. When I laid out the situation, his reaction was devoid of the family's manipulative softness. "Avery, that's not just unacceptable, it's fraud," he said, his voice sharp with indignation. "They took your money under false pretenses and then excluded you. Have you considered this as strategic? It's not just cruel, it's a power play. They're telling you that you're good enough to be their bank, but not good enough to be their family." His words cut through the emotional fog. This wasn't just a messy family drama. It was a calculated act of degradation, designed to put me in my place. And as more family members called with the same tired script, my exclusion was for my own good, my money was a gift, my anger was instability. The pattern became undeniable. This was a conspiracy. An entire family had decided that my money was welcome, but my presence was not. The revelation of this systematic betrayal demanded a response of equal calculation. That evening, I locked myself in my home office, surrounded by a decade's worth of acquisition files and corporate records. My legal team worked through the night, tracing the intricate web of subsidiaries that made up Apex Hospitality, What we uncovered transformed my understanding of the power I had quietly amassed. Aspen Bloom Events, the wedding planning firm, was a subsidiary of a larger event solutions company I had acquired out of bankruptcy 3 years prior. Stonehaven Manor, the breathtaking venue Leo and Chloe had chosen, was part of my luxury properties division. Summit Fair Catering reported to Apex through a holding company so complex that few knew I was the ultimate owner. And the Meridian Grand Hotel, where all 60 wedding guests had confirmed reservations, was the crown jewel of my hotel portfolio. Every single vendor, every service, every last detail of Leo's wedding was connected directly to a company I owned. The family who had dismissed my business as Avery's little hobby had, without knowing it, planned their entire celebration within my empire. My call to Fiona the next morning was short and precise. When I identified myself not just as the client, but as the ultimate owner of her parent company, the silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "Mrs. Clark, I had no idea," she stammered. "The corporate structure is... My husband never mentioned... My husband has no operational role in Apex Hospitality," I cut in, my voice cold as steel. "He has also demonstrated a disturbing habit of misrepresenting both his authority and my consent." Her professional composure dissolved. She had taken instructions from a man with zero authority, dismissing the concerns of the woman who owned her entire company. "Mrs. Clark, if I had known, I would never..." "Fiona, I need you to listen very carefully," I said. "When my husband instructed you to exclude me from the Dawson Reed wedding while keeping my funds, he was committing fraud. I want you to contact every single vendor associated with this event and inform them that their services are no longer required. All contracts are to be terminated immediately. All reservations are to be canceled." Another stunned silence. "Mrs. Clark, are you sure? The wedding is next month. Finding replacements will be impossible." "I am absolutely certain," I said. "My family made a business decision to exclude me while retaining my financial assets. They are about to learn what happens when the infrastructure you depend on is owned by the person you betray. This was not an act of petty revenge. This was the same calculated, strategic response that had built my empire. Leo and Chloe had made a choice to be complicit in my humiliation. Now they would discover that choices have consequences. For years, I had played the role of the quiet, accommodating wife, funding their lives while remaining invisible. But for the first time, I felt the intoxicating clarity of exercising my power without apology. The family that had so casually discarded me was about to find out that the quiet woman they underestimated held every single card in the game. The fallout began within hours. The first call was from Jessica, and I let it ring 3 times before answering, savoring the moment. "Avery, something awful is happening." Her voice was shrill with panic. "Every vendor just canceled. The venue, the caterer, the hotel, everything is gone." I kept my voice calm. "That sounds very concerning, Jessica." "Did they give a reason?" "They're all saying it's corporate policy changes or parent company directives. It makes no sense. How can they all just cancel?" Her bewilderment was exquisite. She was calling the woman they had betrayed to solve a problem created by that very betrayal. "Have you tried finding other vendors?" I asked, my voice laced with false helpfulness. "That's the crazy part. Every decent venue in the Denver area is suddenly booked. Every good caterer is unavailable. It's like the entire industry has blacklisted us." Her assessment was remarkably astute. The industry had, in fact, blacklisted them, all on my command. Leo's call came next. He was more methodical, but his professional detachment quickly crumbled. "Avery, I have to ask you directly. Do you have any idea why all our wedding vendors would cancel on the same day?" "It does seem like an unusual coincidence," I replied smoothly. "Have you considered that someone with significant industry influence might be involved?" A long pause. Are you saying someone is deliberately sabotaging our wedding? He asked, alarm creeping into his voice. Who would have the power to do something like this? I wouldn't want to guess the motivation, I said carefully, but the capability. That would require someone with very deep connections across the entire hospitality sector. He was finally starting to grasp that this was no accident. Ethan's response was, predictably, pure rage. Avery, you need to fix this mess right now, he commanded, his voice dripping with entitlement. Leo is panicking and Jessica hasn't stopped crying. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. I'm not playing a game, Ethan. I am simply allowing the natural consequences of your actions to unfold. Natural consequences, he roared. You're destroying your brother-in-law's wedding out of spite. This is exactly the kind of emotional instability we were trying to avoid. The victim blaming was pathological. He had orchestrated my humiliation and theft and was now using my response as proof that he was right to do so. You excluded me from a wedding I funded and stole $50,000, Ethan. If you can explain how that's reasonable, I'm listening. You offered that money as a gift. Your success has made you think you can buy your way into everything. His words dripped with years of festering resentment. This was never about a wedding. It was about his bruised ego. By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into a roar throughout Denver's hospitality community. The story of the quiet mogul who had dismantled a wedding with a few phone calls was becoming a legend. Competitors who had once underestimated me were now reassessing their entire market strategy. The quiet woman who preferred to give anonymously had revealed the true scope of her power, and the entire industry was taking notice. The chaos surrounding Leo's wedding was just the beginning. The final act of this family drama was set for Monday morning. I sent formal invitations to Ethan, Leo, Chloe, Jessica, and both sets of parents, summoning them to the Apex Hospitality headquarters. The 40th floor conference room, with its panoramic city views and walls adorned with industry awards, was designed to intimidate. The massive table, carved from a single piece of Colorado walnut, was the perfect stage. They arrived looking shell-shocked. Ethan's usual arrogance was gone, replaced by the uncertain posture of a man who had lost control. Leo and Chloe looked like defendants at a trial they didn't understand. I sat at the head of the table, dressed in a Navy power suit, feeling the confidence that comes from holding all the cards. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice cool and professional. I believe we have several matters to discuss. The silence was absolute. For the first time, they were listening. It was Leo who spoke first. Avery, I am so sorry, he said, his voice thick with genuine remorse. There's no excuse. I was a coward. I should have stood up to the family, and I should have recognized that no amount of family harmony justifies treating you with such blatant disrespect. His sincerity was a stark contrast to Ethan's defensive silence. Your apology is noted, Leo, I said, but apologies don't erase a coordinated deception. Ethan finally found his voice. Avery, we were just trying to prevent drama. It was never meant as an insult. Protect me by stealing my money and humiliating me? I asked calmly. Explain the logic, Ethan. He stammered, his usual bluster failing him. He tried to bargain, to talk about family unity. The situation has been resolved, Ethan, I cut in. Your brother's wedding was canceled because the family who excluded me discovered they had no other options. However, I said, rising and walking to the window, I am prepared to offer terms for a resolution. The room held its breath. The wedding can proceed under new conditions. First, the cost will now be $75,000, payable in advance. Second, I require formal written apologies from Ethan, Jessica, and both sets of parents, acknowledging your actions were unacceptable. Third, there will be a public acknowledgement during the wedding reception of what happened and why. The terms were non-negotiable. You have 48 hours to decide if Leo and Chloe have a wedding under these conditions, or if they'll be explaining to 60 guests why there's no celebration at all. 48 hours later, the wire transfer for $75,000 appeared in my account, followed by letters of apology that ranged from Leo's heartfelt contrition to Ethan's grudging admission of poor judgment. 4 weeks later, I stood in the hall of a smaller, more elegant venue, another of my properties. The guest list was cut to 40, creating an intimacy the original lavish affair never would have had. Every detail was my vision, understated, elegant, and meaningful. Frank and Chloe, humbled and grateful, exchanged their vows against a backdrop of a stunning mountain sunset. During the reception, Leo stood up. "Before we toast," he began, his voice clear and steady, "I need to acknowledge the person whose generosity and forgiveness made this day possible. Avery did not just fund our wedding. She rebuilt our family's integrity after we had thrown it away. She taught us that real strength isn't about dominance, but about using power to demand decency." Chloe then stood, tears in her eyes. "I want to publicly apologize to Avery," she said. "We responded to extraordinary kindness with disrespect and betrayal. She taught us a lesson about dignity that I hope our marriage will live up to." The next morning, Ethan found me in the kitchen. He held a bouquet of flowers, his face haggard. "Avery, we need to talk. 12 years. That has to count for something." I just kept making my coffee. 12 years of you benefiting from my success while dismissing it. 12 years that ended with you stealing from me and orchestrating my humiliation. He saw my Porsche Cayenne in the driveway, already packed. It had only taken 2 hours to gather what was truly mine from our shared life. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Away," I said, picking up my purse and keys. "Away from you, your family, and any relationship where my contribution is valued, but my presence is not." His pleas followed me out to the garage, but I didn't look back. I had spent 12 years looking back, making excuses for them. The garage door opened, and the morning sun illuminated the road to a future where my worth was non-negotiable. 3 months later, my life was my own. Apex Hospitality had moved to a new, larger headquarters, our business booming as my story became an industry legend. Clients now sought us out not just for our services, but for an association with the kind of decisive strength I had demonstrated. Frank and Chloe had started a scholarship fund in my honor for hospitality students, turning their lesson into a legacy. The divorce was proceeding, with Ethan's settlement offers becoming increasingly desperate as he realized the magnitude of what he'd lost. The solitude I once feared now felt like peace. It was the quiet satisfaction of a life built on my own terms, surrounded by people who respected me. The silent empress had always been there. She just needed the right circumstances to finally speak up. And now that she had, she would never be silenced again. If this story of quiet strength turning into powerful justice had you captivated, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Avery revealed she owned every single wedding vendor, watching their shock unfold in real time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more incredible stories of underestimated women finding their power. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.